Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be going over sleeper picks in this year's NBA draft class. My first sleeper pick that I think he's going to be, a potential all-star is Trey Johnson out of Texas. Now, some of his strengths are, he could score from anywhere, he wants at any time he wants. He was the man at Texas when they needed a shot or, they were down a possession or, you know, anything. It was him who had the ball in his hand, and he had to either play make or score, or that team wasn't going to be good. Now, the biggest thing I love about Trey Johnson is he's not afraid to take that big time shot when you need that shot, or hey, I'm down, two possessions, and I need this bucket. He wants that ball in his hand, and he's not afraid to take it, and he's not afraid to miss it. Now, defensively, he's not a lockdown defender. He does gamble on a lot of steals, but his potential's there. His measurements on the combine, were pretty good. His wingspan is not, smaller than his height, which is big for, point guards, shooting guards, even small forwards. You don't want that Desmond Bain type of built, no offense. Even though he's gifted offensively, Desmond Bain does get picked out defensively, and pretty much any game, late game situation, especially playoffs. And that brings me to my next prospect, Derek Queen out of Maryland. Queen averaged about 16 and a half points, 9 rebounds, and 1.9 assists per game. Now Queen's measurements, were 6'9" and a half, barefoot. Nothing too crazy, but they have him listed as a center. I think he's more of a power forward. Now Queen is getting comps to Kevin Love. As you can see, their measurements are super alike. In my opinion, I don't think he's that well-rounded of a rebounder than Kevin Love right now. That might have to do something more with his motor. I think his potential is there. He's not afraid to shoot the mid range or shoot from three, which is good. You want your big men nowadays to be able to space the floor, especially in big games. You will get picked out and you will be subbed out if you can't adapt. Queen's biggest strength, in my opinion, is his hands. When he has the ball in his hands and he's posting up, it looks so natural for him to either score in a low block or pass it out, make the right play. He could bring the ball up the court, which is kind of where the NBA is heading as a big man. If you could do that, space the floor. The biggest weakness of Derek Queen, is his defense. He can't really jump that high. He measured around 28 in his vertical leap. It's nothing huge, but as a big man, you do need to rim protect. That brings me to Jeremiah Fears out of Oklahoma. Now, Jeremiah Fears could be the second best guard in this year's draft class. Now, Jeremiah Fears is, the most shiftiest guard, I think, in this year's draft class, in my opinion. His player comp is, Darius Garland. Take that with a grain of salt because, when Darius Garland first got in the league, he was voted, most overrated player, the worst player, which was crazy to say in his first or second year. But his potential is there. I could see him, being the Darius Garland. I can even see Jeff Teague comparisons. Those guys are really good guys. Like, Jeff Teague was an all-star. Darius Garland is an all-star. I'm personally a fan of Jeremiah Fears. I see the all-star already in the making. He could, create his own shot. I really like his handle. He's shifty. He's low to the ground because he's not the biggest, and that's what you want as a point guard. You want your point guard to make plays and other people around you better, and that's what Jeremiah Fears does. Yes, he's not the biggest guard, but look at CP3. I'm not comparing him, but like he's a small guard and he's lasted forever in this league. Now, do I think Jeremiah Fears is going to come in right away, impact that team he gets drafted to? I don't think so. The point guard position is going to be the hardest position to learn in the NBA. You have to, be the brains of the operation, for the most part. Everyone's bigger, faster, stronger, and smarter at that position. So I believe in Jeremiah Fears. I think he has the potential to be an all-star. And my favorite sleeper pick, Con Knipple out of Duke, who averaged about 14 points a game, 5 rebounds. But the biggest thing is he shot 40% from the 3-point. And a lot of people are going to say, well, Colin Knippel, wasn't really that good. He was just a catch and shoot player. He didn't really create his own shot. Maybe defensively, he's not all there. I personally think defensively, he could hold his ground. He's about 6'5.5" barefoot. Let's just call him 6'6", with shoes on. He could shoot the lights out. He's the best shooter in this draft class. And if we've seen one thing with college prospects, most of the time that shooting continues in the NBA. They don't forget that. And if you're a playoff contender, such as San Antonio, number 2 pick, Philadelphia, number 3 pick, even the Houston Rockets at 10, I would, look into drafting this guy, trade down, get some picks, get some players. Rockets may, trade up. I know a lot of rumors, the big names, Giannis, KD. If we've seen one thing, super teams are kind of fading away. Now you have to build through the draft, trade for the right role players. And I think Colin Knippel fits in any system. He could play any role he wants because that's the type of player he is. He could, catch, shoot, defend, and make the right pass. Now, I do think Colin Knippel's potential is limited. I don't think he's going to be, an all-star. But I do think he could be like that Austin Reeves type of player. Austin Reeves just averaged 20 points a game. If you get that at pick 7, pick 8, or, you trade down and you get more and you get Colin Knippel, I think that is a steal in this year's draft class. And if we learn one thing about this year's playoffs is that, super teams are not going to be needed to win the championship anymore. Look at the Pacers, look at the Thunder. They've drafted well. They traded for players, who the teams, didn't want anymore. They let them go in free agency, or they just traded them to, trade for a superstar. Colin Knippel could be that piece to a championship team that you're either going to regret not drafting, regret, trading a pick. Another guy I'm really high on is Carter Bryant out of Arizona. Now, Carter Bryant's stats are not going to justify him going to the lottery, top 10 in this year's draft class. What people banking on is his offensive potential. His defensive potential, everyone could see it. It's clear in the water. Now, Carter was never really asked to be that number 1 option on the Wildcats. He had Caleb Love and KJ Simpson to carry the offensive load. What was asked for him was to guard, the best players, make that defensive stop. Hey, be ready to catch and shoot from 3. Hey, move without the ball, cut, get offensive rebounds, do the dirty work. And he did that really well. And everyone saw in this combine, hey, this guy does have the potential to be, that Kawhi Leonard-esque player. I know we say that every year, but I truly believe if Carter does get drafted into the right situation and develops the right way without rushing it, because he is a project player. This guy's not going to be an impact player. Now, if Carter doesn't develop his offensive potential, you just kind of drafted a defensive player, top 10 or in the lottery, and it's looking bad. But his upside is just through the roof. I think Carter Bryant could be that. Still, we look back, 5 years from now and say, how did that guy drop to 10 in this year's draft class? Another guy we're going to talk about is Colin Murray Boyles out of South Carolina. Now, Colin Murray Boyles is probably the best defender in this draft class. You could say Carter Bryant, you could say Cooper Flag, but he's just up there with them. He's a sophomore. The knock on him, everyone knows this too, is his 3-point shot. He needs to develop a 3-point shot, especially being an undersized power forward. A lot of people are comparing him to, that Draymond Green. I could see it. Draymond's an undersized power forward, but, he's a defensive menace, defensive player of the year, future Hall of Famer and NBA champion. Do you believe that Colin Murray Boyles is that too? Now, I've seen Murray Boyles mock to the 20s. I seen him in the 17. I see him in the lottery. And it's really hard because I think he is a lottery type player. But shooting 18% from 3 in the year 2025 in the NBA is really, really hard to get on the court. You better be really, really good at something else, which I think he is a really good defender. But is he good enough to stay on the court in the fourth quarter, with 5 minutes left? I don't know. And I do see that Draymond type player in him. Not only, he's an undersized power forward, but that defensive mindset of him. He doesn't truly believe it matters being an undersized power forward. He says, hey, I'm going to guard, I'm going to get the rebound, and I'm going to dunk on you. And, you're maybe 4 inches taller, you may be, 10, 15 pounds heavier, but I'm a better player. I'll lock you up. And that mindset is a championship mindset. It's just that 3-point shot. You need to be able to shoot. And it's hard to take a player that high in the draft that cannot space the floor. I truly believe that Murray Boyles is a playoff player right now. I believe if the Rockets selected him at 10 or the Spurs selected him at 14 and they make the playoffs or play in and they say, hey, Murray, go lock up the best player, go get some rebounds, play the part. I truly believe he could do it. It's just the 3-point shot that he would definitely get exposed. They would not even attempt to guard him on offense. And it's really hard to convince a team, say, hey, draft this player when he's an undersized power forward in his position. He can't shoot from three, but hey, he's super good defensively. It's really hard to say, yes, let's take him with our 10th pick or 14th pick or, even, in the teens pick. In the 20s, you could get away with that because, you're kind of banking on potential there. Or, hey, why did this guy fall again? Oh, yeah, he can't shoot. Well, we could, bank on it because usually the teams in the 20s, are, playoff teams. Now, Murray Boyles, has all the potential to, be a defensive player of the year. He's getting comps to Draymond Green. And I think he's more of that Tari Eason type player, less of that offensive game of Tari Eason. But they have similar size. I like Tari Eason's, defensive ability too. But obviously, he's a way better offensive player than Murray Boyles right now and when he came in the league. But yeah, guys, that's it for my first round sleeper picks in this year's draft class, man.